they have children, think about what this world would look like if you didn't have Donald Trump as the president. Because in a year, if you had someone who didn't have the courage to do this action, you'd have 30 or 40 nuclear bombs. And what would the world look like there? So thank God we have a president and leadership at the helm that makes these courageous decisions.
Just one vicious lie after the next from Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, who was responsible for meeting with the Iranians indirectly, actually, to come up with a peace deal that, wow, shockingly did not come to fruition. Could it be because Witkoff really had no interest in a peace deal to begin with? I don't know. Now, there he is lying about Iran supposedly having the capacity to build literally dozens of nuclear bombs. But nonetheless, public opinion polls are so dire for the president's war against Iran that the aides working for him are now urging him to find an exit ramp. Before we get to all of that and more, Cenk, your 2 cents.
Yeah, in this case, I have 3 cents. One is you're gonna see that the Republicans still seem to be holding with Trump, but there's actually a softness to those numbers. I'm gonna show you what I mean by that softness and why it could crumble right away. Number 2, there's a number in here among all the different polls we're gonna show you that is startling. You're gonna tell your family and friends about it tonight, so don't miss that. And finally, we did our own poll that you guys financed. Does America owe Israel any more money? Wait till you see the results of that.
So let's actually begin with the latest polling. And there's been a number of polls that have come out that I think are worth looking into. I'll start with the New York Times, which basically did this aggregate of polls to kind of show this fun graphic that indicates the support for US military intervention in the first days of the Iran wars, super low compared to previous conflicts, okay? So as you can see here, the Iran war has just 41% support among the American people. Juxtapose that with the 97% support Americans had for the US entering the fight in World War II. 92% of Americans supported the 2001 invasion into Afghanistan. Obviously, that was after the 9/11 terror attacks that took place. And then even the super unpopular war in Iraq, which most Americans now say was a massive mistake, the war that we entered in 2003, even that had 76% support. Fast forward to the first few days of the Iran war, and you see, again, only 41% of Americans are behind it. Now, the latest Quinnipiac poll also has some pretty damning results. For instance, 53% of voters oppose the US military action against Iran, while 40% support it. Again, this is Gallup. And it is strange that the percentage of individuals who are against the war in Iran isn't higher, especially when you consider this. 77% of voters think it is either very likely at 33% or somewhat likely at 44% that there will be a terrorist attack on US soil in response to the US military action against Iran. I would say that a higher percentage of Americans should be against the war if that's genuinely what they think. More Americans are also, opposing the idea of sending troops to Iran. 74% of voters oppose sending US ground troops into Iran, while 20% support it. Those 20% are un-American and enemies of our country. A majority of voters, 55%, do not think Iran posed an imminent threat or military threat to the United States before the current US military action against Iran. By the way, 74% of Republicans sadly think that Iran did pose an imminent threat to the United States, which just isn't true. Iran did not have the military capability or the missiles necessary to reach the United States. But I think this shows you just how much media propaganda has a hold on the American people. Because if you're watching Fox News, you will definitely think that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States. Further, 63% of voters say that Trump has not provided a clear explanation for why we are at war with Iran. And then finally, Cenk, this is what I find to be the most devastating, because I think this percentage is too low. 44% of voters think the US is too supportive of Israel, while 5% think the US is not supportive enough of Israel. And 44% think the US support of Israel is about right. So equal percentages think that it's either too much support or just about right, the right amount of support. I think that having a foreign country control our foreign policy has been not only to the detriment of the United States, I think it has destroyed the United States and driven us into a massive amount of debt. And by the way, Gallup is just one of many polls, I should note, that demonstrate the lack of popularity that Trump seems to enjoy overall when it comes to his foreign policy decisions in his second term. Nonetheless, Cenk, 44%, too low, right?
Yeah, it is, but I mean, it's a giant sea change of a difference. So let me break it down one by one. On the support for Israel, it used to be sky high. There used to be almost no support for the Palestinians. Why? Because traditionally national media reported things 100% from Israel's perspective. The poor Israelis are terrorized by the Palestinians who are all terrorists. And poor Israel needs our help, etc. And the Palestinians are such vicious, aggressive, genocidal freaks. They want to kill all the Israelis, right? So now if you grew up watching that, you would think, well, of course I'm against the Palestinians and I'm in favor of the poor victims, the Israelis. Now, of course, the reality is that it's not true at all. The Israelis occupy the Palestinians, not vice versa. We've been over this many times, but that's exactly what's happening here. Online media is starting to tell you the truth. It's actually national media that have been lying to you throughout, right? So now as more and more people get the real truth, and by the way, they go to verify it. You could go online now and do your own research. Before, I mean, Anna, I grew up in an era where there was no internet. You couldn't do your own research. So if Jake Tapper told you Israel's the greatest, most moral country in the world and they're being abused and the Palestinians are dirty terrorists, you literally had no way of looking that up. So everyone believed it, right? So it started out at like 100 to 0. So that's why it coming to a tie now is shocking for the people who support Israel. They're like, how could this be? We are the immortal victims, right? So it's an enormous sea change and it's only going in one direction. It's never gonna go back to, oh yeah, let's support that state that committed a genocide with our money, which drove us into this war, got so many of our troops killed, injured, etc. So the support for Israel is decaying at a rate I have never seen on any other issue. Okay, so now let's go to the softness for the Republicans that I talked about. So about 3/4 of Republicans still support this war. They bought into the propaganda. Oh, like it's an imminent threat, and Donald Trump is protecting us, etc. Now 3/4 sounds like a bad number. Like, well, where's the MAGA Civil War and all that stuff? On the other hand, guys, it used to be in the 90s. So now 1/4 of even Republicans are questioning this war. Second of all, a lot of people forget, almost everybody forgets in almost every one of these articles, Trump had a lot of independent voters, a ton of independent voters. And the independent voters are gone, right? They're not like the Republicans. They're massively against this war, right? Secondly, in the Republican numbers, there's huge softness. Number one is, now when you ask them about ground troops, a majority of Republicans go, oh, hell no, no, with ground troops. They didn't say that during the Iraq war. They didn't say that in other wars. But now they're not just watching Fox News, they're also watching Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, and so many other shows that are online, and they're now finally getting two different points of view. And when you get the correct point of view and the incorrect point of view, it really becomes exceedingly obvious which one is right and which one is not. The Fox News side can't describe any real threats to America. The other side explains why this is all about Israel. So the other side has all of the facts. But Anna, you're right. Later in the show, we're gonna show a clip of Lindsey Graham on Fox News. And again, if you're in that boomer class that's watching Fox News, which is a big number of Republicans, a lot of older voters, right? They watch Lindsey Graham telling them, oh my God, Iran was gonna have 11 nuclear warheads they could fire at America within weeks.
Yeah.
So if you watch that and you really believe it, you're like, oh, thank God President Trump saved us from San Antonio and Albuquerque getting nuked. Because Lindsey Graham told me it was weeks away and Sean Hannity agreed. He saved our lives because they don't know any better, right? But even so, it's soft.
Okay, well, Fox News has been around. Look, I get that I vacillate from being empathetic to right now. I'm not going to be very empathetic, but Fox News has been around since the 1990s, correct?
Yeah, 90s.
And Netanyahu has been fear mongering about Iran's supposed nuclear capability since like the late 80s. So like, I don't get it. to the Fox News audience, if any of them happen to be watching this, which I doubt, aren't you tired of pooping in your depends over non-existent threats? Like, seriously, consider that. Consider the fact that you've heard the same lies over and over again for literally decades. But look, they'll be long gone because Fox News' audience, of course, is much older. And when they're long gone, the rest of us will be here to pick up the massive mess left behind by, destroying our economy, by getting involved in these ridiculous interventions, not on our own behalf, not because it benefited the United States or the American people, but because it was demanded from us by a foreign country that pays off our politicians or blackmails them if they're unwilling to be bought. That's what's really going on here. Yeah. But anyway, let's talk about what Trump knows, because last week there was some concern that his aides were misleading him, that they weren't showing Trump the polling that indicated that he is actually losing whatever's left of his popularity as a result of getting dragged into these interventions. Well, now the Wall Street Journal says that his aides have in fact briefed him on some polling about the war. Public polls released in recent days, the Wall Street Journal wrote, show that most Americans oppose the war. But here's how White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt responded to that. While many in the president's conservative base still support the initial operation, this is from the Wall Street Journal. This isn't Leavitt's quote, but the journal notes, while some in the president's conservative base still support the initial operation, some of the president's advisors have privately expressed concerns that a longer war could deplete that support. But as far as what they're saying publicly, especially when it comes to Caroline Leavitt, White House press secretary, she says the vast majority of Americans support ending the threat posed by the Iranian regime and support killing terrorists. And that's what President Trump is going to accomplish. Okay, let's talk about what President Trump has accomplished so far in Iran. He has accomplished the bombing of an elementary school, killing 160 plus little girls and about 14 adults who happen to work at the school. He has managed to, decapitate the regime by taking out Ali Khamenei, who was then replaced by his son, who is a hardliner, much more hardline than his father was. And on top of that, just had several members of his family executed thanks to the United States and Israel. So he's gonna be even more, that's the reason why they chose him. He's potentially gonna be even more vicious, right? So what exactly did we accomplish here? We didn't accomplish anything other than forcing the American people to go deeper into debt to the tune of $1 to $2 billion a day. That's how much it's costing us to fight Israel's war. Be clear on that. Be informed on that. Know what you're getting yourself into when you support Trump's ridiculous interventionism. On top of that, one thing that's clear is that Trump has no idea what he's doing, Cenk. Last week, he said that Iran needs to surrender unconditionally, otherwise the war would not end. On Monday, he told the New York Post that even though earlier he said he was considering ground troops, now he's not considering it at all. Later that same day, Trump said that, the war could be over very soon. It could be over very soon. And then later that night, he said, we could go further and we're going to go further. So he is speaking from both sides of his mouth. He has no clear objective or goal here. And it seems that Trump is a better representative of the Israeli people as opposed to the American people, because take a look at this. So this compares US support for the war in Iran versus Israeli support. And as you can see, when it comes to Americans, 36% approve, 54% disapprove of military intervention in Iran. But the numbers are very different for the Israelis. 82% approve, 13% disapprove. And if you're wondering where these poll numbers come from, the top poll representing Americans was done by NPR PBS Marist from March 2nd through the 4th. And the Israeli polling was carried out by the Israel Democracy Institute from March 2nd through the 3rd. Cenk, back to you.
Yeah, so some of those Israelis rethinking that now that they're hiding in their shelters and crying about bombs hitting Israel. We'll share that with you later in the show. Look, another reason why the numbers are soft, when you ask about gas prices, 74% are concerned that the war is going to cause higher gas prices and they're going to be mad about it. So, including a very large chunk of Republicans. Trump overall on almost every issue from the economy to immigration to this war is 20 points underwater. Guys, don't sleep on that. Those are disastrous numbers. When Biden was near those numbers, I said that he had a 0% chance of winning, and that turned out to be correct. And Trump is in big trouble. A lot of the press is scared of him, so they don't report it as they should. The reality is he's at maximum Biden dementia levels of bad polling. So that these numbers are super soft. By the way, over 3/4 of Americans say no ground troops, including a significant majority of Republicans. Now, the shocking, devastating number. So when we first went into the Iraq war, it had a popularity of 76%. That's because almost all of our politicians and almost all of our media lied and said that Iraq had attacked us on 9/11 and they had weapons of mass destruction. Oh my God, we're gonna get nuked. Just like you saw Steve Witkoff say the same lies over and over again. But they said those lies for so long that over 3/4 of the country wanted to go in. Now, for Iran war, we started at 41%. That is unbelievably low, okay? And that's the higher of the two numbers that we showed you, right? But what did we end the Iraq war on? Remember, at the end of the Iraq war, after we've been there about a decade, and we lost so many guys, so many injured, it was a giant mess. We spent trillions of dollars, and it was so unpopular that we had to leave. At that point, Iraq war's popularity was 43%, higher than where the Iran war started. So the minute we start taking significant casualties, which we now have reports that 150 Americans have been wounded, that just dropped right before the show. That's a big number that they were hiding, let alone the 7 dead, etc. And the gas prices continue to go up. This is gonna go from 41 to a number we've never seen, right? So this is a disaster in the making. Now, one of the reasons that of course we're pushing this war, not one of the, oh, by the way, I should also note, and I mentioned all the flip-flopping of Donald Trump. Senator Blumenthal came out of a top intelligence briefing and said, it looks like we're getting ground troops ready. So there's a lot of yip yap and talking. But the bottom line is, what's the war planning? And Senator Blumenthal is saying they're planning on ground troops. So that's the important part. Now, all of this, of course, is for Israel. And so we have no interest in Iran at all. And if we did, we don't anymore. We wiped out everything they had related to nukes, their regime, their ballistic missiles, their navy, etc. The only people left dissatisfied are the Israelis, who say keep pushing and spend all your money for us, as Anna pointed out, 1 to 2 billion a day for this war alone. All right, so we asked, I asked this question when I was on Tucker Carlson's show. And then I asked if mainstream media will ask it, and they're like, no, you cannot ask Americans if they support Israel. It's an outrageous thing to do in terms of financially, because that's the only thing that matters. Are we gonna keep sending them money? Are we gonna keep using our money to back them up militarily, right? So of course, none of them did that poll as we suspect. So I asked you guys to finance it, and you did. You're amazing. So we did a real poll with YouGov. Over 1,000 people answered it, about the same number of Republicans and Democrats. In fact, they leaned a little bit more Republican in this poll. And we asked a simple question: should the US continue to provide financial support for Israel? That is a position that has been very popular for as long as I've been alive. Or the US doesn't owe Israel any more money, or not sure. 21%, as you're seeing on the screen there, say not sure. That's a big number, that's not sure. 49% say no, we do not owe Israel any more money. And only 30% say we should continue to financially support Israel.
Can I ask you something, Jake? Yeah. Hold on. Why do you use that wording? Because I need to understand if this is actually a thing. Why the hell would we ever owe any foreign country any money unless we did damage to their country and promised to repair things? Like, why would we owe Israel money?
Well, that's what all of mainstream media and all the politicians tell us, that we owe them. When we say, hey, why do we owe them? They go, special ally.
Anything. No, we don't owe them anything. Like, that wording is so triggering to me. We don't owe them Jack, okay? Like that framing is wrong. I haven't heard that framing on mainstream media, by the way. I don't know where you've heard it.
No, Anna, it is implicit in every single thing they say. When you question, why do we have to give Israel all this money? They call you an anti-Semite and say, you owe us, how dare you question it? How dare you? Like if we ask, why do we owe money to Bulgaria or Thailand? Literally no one would question that. That would be a very normal debate, discussion, etc. When you ask it about Israel, they're like, how dare you, right? Well, what does it mean, how dare I? So yeah, let me ask Americans, do we owe these guys? And why on God's green earth would we owe them, right? I'm actually, look, this is a real poll. We did it with YouGov, and I told you before we did it, we don't know what the results are gonna be. I'm actually surprised that it was only 49%. But that goes to the poll that we covered earlier in this segment, Anna, which is that support for Israel was so incredibly high because literally no one had ever heard a single critical thing about Israel for about 40 years straight in this country. Mainstream media lied to them en masse about how they were angelic victims as they continued to take more and more land. And mainstream media implied, you owe them, you owe them, you owe them. How dare you question whether you owe them, right? And now there's only 30% left saying, no, why, no. 30% say yes, we should financially support Israel. They're our beloved allies. That's a number, it's a pretty low number, right? And 49, basically half the country going, we don't owe them a single cent. And 21% saying, I don't know, maybe we owe them. So that's the current state of affairs. If you'd done that poll a couple of years ago, you would have had financially support Israel at 70, 80%. I've never seen numbers deteriorate this quickly.
Yeah, it turns out people don't enjoy watching a genocide live stream for 2.5 years, but anyway.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.